Hey guys, welcome to the wrong end of the snake. Hope you all guys are here. I'm Ken Pooch Van Druten, and I've got my co-host here, Kevin Tater McCarthy. Say hi, Kevin.
Hello, everyone.
How's everybody doing today? Welcome. Just a couple of housekeeping rules and stuff that we got going on. I'm sure you guys are all used to the Zoom webinar-ish type of things. But we want to make this as interactive as possible. So over in the right-hand side is a chat button, or on the bottom is a chat button, and you guys can chat amongst yourselves. You can, talk to each other, have conversations about that. And then there's another button called Q&A, which is the questions. And we'd love, as we're kind of just, hanging out here, talking about audio and live event and all that kind of stuff, for you guys to, throw questions at us. We would love for this to be as interactive as possible. The idea stemmed from a bunch of us talking about how there's a relationship between the front of house engineer and the monitor engineer that is often quirky and entertaining.
Dysfunctional.
Dysfunctional. Certainly in our business. But I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's two other people here joining us. There's Jim Digby and Shelby. Shelby's kind of running the whole thing. She's our master behind the scenes there. And Jim runs the Showmaker Symposium, which eventually, when we get to all leave our houses, will be an event and for the live event industry with all kinds of stuff that Tater and I will also be a part of. And so this is kind of leading into that. And Jim is helping us to host this webinar, and we're very grateful to have him here.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jim for giving us the platform to do this. And for a car guy, the girl with one of the coolest names around, I call her Carol Shelby, but her name's Cheryl Kelby. I say it backwards all the time, but I'd like to thank Shelby for all the hard work she's done on this, and don't ever change your name.
And thank you guys for seeing the vision. Living next to you, we're with you for 10 years or so. I don't know about you guys, but I sat back and saw the comedy in everything that you were in every day. And I felt like that's the thing we got to bring to this webinar. We got to find that comedy.
Yeah, I think I think that we certainly are going to do that. To me, this webinar is going to evolve into whatever it becomes, but what we wanted to show is that there is this quirky relationship that happens between a front of house guy and a monitor engineer, and all the rest of the crew for that matter. So if you're not an audio person, hang in with us. We're not just going to talk about audio. In fact, in future ones, we're going to have all kinds of guests, and some of those guests include like band members that we've worked with. We're going to have, heads of sound companies that can come talk with us.
Manufacturers,
those kind of things. So I look at this really as kind of an interactive discussion of us getting together and kind of hanging out for an hour and talking about audio. But included in that is our relationship between Tater and I. My story is kind of all over the internet right now because we've all been doing podcasts and all that kind of stuff. I was a musician. I went to Berklee College of Music. I got into this industry in kind of a weird way. I feel like I've been super blessed and lucky to work with some major artists. But I don't think, Tater, your story is out there too much. Like, people know who you are and they know that you're a badass monitor engineer, but they don't know like where you came from or what you've done. Why don't you share with us just a little bit what's going on with that?
Yeah, I've been a little light on my web presence, that's for sure. And this is the start of it. So,
why have you been light on it? What have you been doing?
I'm just waiting for the offers. They haven't come.
Got it.
No, they have come. I'm just waiting for the right thing. I wanted to do the right stuff, and had to figure out the right medium to do it on. I didn't really want to talk ohms, watt, dB. Everybody's talking that. And bump it up a notch and use a 58 and a 57. And, that's being on. I wanted to dive into how the independent monitor and front of house have in the industry and build the relationships from all aspects, not just from the musicians, but from the manufacturers you got to work with, to the sound companies, to other crew members. So that's why I really liked what we got going on here and wanted to participate. But my story dates back to the mid 80s, really.
Mid 80s.
Mid 80s.
You're old.
I don't want to say you claim to be a musician. I was not a musician.
You were too.
Player.
Tell them. Yeah, you were a bass player, but you played player. What? Only one string?
I only played one. I went down to two once in a while, and to hit an octave, I did use that third one every once in a while, but I could have got away with two. So to say I was a musician is not really the proper thing. I was a bass player, and at the time, the clubs we were playing at didn't have PA systems. So you had to have a PA to play these places. And we started building a PA system. And by the time pretty much high school was over, I was out of the band and had the PA system, and I was doing pretty good money. I think I was making $400 to $500 a week, which in 85, 86, that was fine for me. I was making a living.
So you sorry to interrupt you. So you got a PA system, and you were working for other bands besides the band that you worked for, or
correct,
that you played for, right?
Correct, because those, you had to, if to play out, you had to have a PA system. So I had purchased this stuff over the years, got it together. I had a pretty good little system, and doing clubs with it. And then I want to say around 86, maybe early 87, the Detroit club scene was, they were putting in house PAs, and my business was dwindling. And on a side note, before this, the one guy who was our one roadie in the band in high school, his dad got transferred down to Texas, and as a joke, he went to Shoko and applied for a job. And not only did he get a job, he got a job that day. So
just because he was like, that's
got a
crazy,
job that day.
Dude. No way.
And he kind of did it just on a whim, like this will never happen. But I think he worked even that day. So he had called me and said, "Hey, I'll get you a job down here at Shoko as soon as you want." But I had the PA going, and I started to see the business dwindle a bunch. And these house PAs were in and all that stuff. And a guy at this one club had the same PA system I had. Exact same cabinet, same consoles, everything. And he offered me to buy all my stuff. And I said, that's it. I sold it all to him and went to Texas.
Perfect. Sell your shit and move to Texas.
Yeah.
I love it.
I didn't really move there, but I went there. And then I started at Shoko in 87, and I worked there 10 years.
So tell us how did that go? Did you contact them? Did you send them a resume? And then what was the job interview like, or what, what was that?
Believe it or not, there was a job interview.
Because guys want to know, they want to know, what's it like
back then. Okay. Yeah. Well, in 87, I had a resume of some sort, but it didn't have much stuff on there than playing a 2-string bass and, and having
your resume is what you just told your story.
Yeah. So, I was 19 going on 20. So, there was not much of a resume, high school and that kind of stuff on there. And I had an interview with a guy named Craig Schertz, who's no longer with us. He was front of house mixer for all the early and mid up probably the 90s Genesis and Phil Collins tours. Great guy. He hired me on the spot, and that started my career. And something I'd like to throw back to then, a lot of people, maybe the younger guys, don't remember, but back then there wasn't an independent engineer base like there is now. If you went to Shoko or you went to Claire Brothers or Sound Image, whoever you went there and used their systems because your mixers worked there. So, let's say Kiss would go to Shoko or Tasco back then because their mixer worked there. And Genesis went to Shoko because their mixer was a staff engineer there. Same with Claire. So there wasn't the independent thing there is nowadays.
And it was more about gear too, right? Like guys are making decisions like, I'm going to go to Shoko because I think their boxes are better, because it was all proprietary boxes at that point.
All proprietary boxes, crossover systems, stuff like that. It's because the off-the-shelf stuff, just didn't cut it.
Right.
So they were going there for, those reasons. And I also think the same as my business, I think back then, those bands had to carry PAs. Even the smaller bands had to carry PAs back then because the places didn't have them. But you go to a lot of places now in the, that mid-level 25 to 5,000 seater, and there's a PA in there already, a good quality PA that you'll use. So, the business like that's changed a lot. And about, I'd say the mid-90s, right around maybe 95 to 97, the independent engineer really became prevalent. Somewhere in there.
Totally. And that's right. Kind of when I came into the picture, as an independent guy coming from a recording engineer producer. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, 97, I left and I had an offer from Alice Cooper to not work for Shoko, to work for him. And, I used that as a building block, to move on from, as an independent engineer from then on.
Awesome. That's quite a story. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. So what are some of, tell us, I hate to do this, we're like, I hate the whole name dropping thing, but in order for us to talk about our relationship, we have to talk about the different bands that we've worked for. But, when you were working for Shoko, you were like, did you start as a stage patcher? Was that your deal? Like, how did you start there?
I don't even know if I started as a stage patcher. I if there's anything lower is what I started as.
Cable humper, feeder guy.
I was, the 6th man on a 3-man crew. But I did everything there. I was a systems engineer for a bit, monitor systems. I had a few bands I was mixing. And everything I did everything because back then everybody thinks Shoko was this huge company, which it was, but there wasn't a lot of staff road crew back then. So,
yeah, I don't know if people know that, Shoko, the evolution of Shoko, they were one of the biggest sound companies in the world, and had their own proprietary boxes called Prism, as well as developing their own wedges, which we'll talk about too. Their little shop there on Regal Row was, I don't even know how many square feet it was. It was tiny.
Yeah, the Shoko part was tiny. The Verilight part was big, right. But the Shoko part was just to me a little side piece, in the front. So it wasn't very big, but a lot of tours went in and out of there, and it kept us road staff very, very busy. We were doing, which I'd never do again. Most people were doing over 300 road days a year, so it was.
Wow.
You were constantly working, and you were going from one to another without going home or any of that stuff. So I'm glad I did that in my youth and got it over with. I couldn't do that at all today. So
yeah, I know, that's crazy. Like in your story, when did your family come along and meeting your wife and all that kind of stuff? That must have been after you started being an independent guy.
Yeah,
right?
I was already an independent engineer by then. But tours seemed to be longer back then. Even as an independent, you seemed like you went out for a lot longer back then. You kind of seemed like now you're doing a few weeks, a month or two here. Back then, like you'd do 6 months and stuff straight, and you didn't think anything of it, And I think it's that the modeling of how people go out and what they do has definitely changed.
Well, it certainly has. In fact, one of our clients that we're working for right now, Iron Maiden, they do 4 months straight. And not just because we're old, but we talk about all the time that like 4 months feels, oh my God, 4 months is so long, and that it's 4 months straight, not going home at all during that 4 months.
Yeah, it is. 4 months now to me is a long time.
Yeah.
And, it takes me longer to prepare and takes me longer to recover now than it ever has. So I kind of like the 4 months. I think our Linkin Park, when we worked for Linkin Park, I think that was a really good schedule. I liked.
Yeah,
we
me
seemed
too.
to work. We seemed to work a lot, but we had breaks, and we'd do 4 weeks here and have a break and do some rehearsals. It was cut up enough. I kind of really preferred that. I don't mind the 4 months. It's just 4 months at a shot. There's no break. I really liked the Linkin Park model. I thought it was fantastic. It worked for me at the time for sure.
I think that was due in part to they all had young families, so they wanted to have some time off with their families, which worked out well for us because at the time you had a relatively young family, and the rest of us, we're at that stages in our life, so it's there's a tip for you: find a band that has families,
young ones,
young ones.
Yeah.
And
I didn't realize it at the time, but at the time, if you looked at my career, I worked for a lot of legacy rock acts, and I want to say
you still are. You're working for Iron Maiden.
Sorry, still am. I think I was always either the same age as them or they were a hair older. I think Linkin Park was one of the first bands in a long time I had worked for that those guys were all 10, 12 years younger than me.
Right.
And I think, I had to think a little bit different and where they're coming from and all that stuff than the bands I had probably worked for in the past.
Yeah, totally. Let's back it up just a little bit and start talking about when you and I started working together and what that was like. It's funny, you guys out there, we purposely did not discuss, we haven't talked about like what Tater thought of me the first time that he met me, or, we haven't had that discussion. We did that on purpose so that we could do it in front of you because we haven't had that discussion since we've been working together, and we've been working together upwards of 18 years now, according to my calculations. I was trying to dig in my head and remember the first band that we worked for. Do you remember what the first band was?
I am not exactly positive, but I think it was Ted Nugent.
I think it was too. And Ted Nugent was a character, man, to work for. How did you get that gig? Do you remember?
I had done Ted, Never Mixed His Monitors, as a crew guy for a bunch of the Whiplash Bashes, which was like a 2-week tour at the end of the year. And he always used Shoko, and I was already in Detroit, so they would just use me. So I think it was Bob Quant, and then I think Robert. Because Robert had become production manager, I think, right at that time.
Oh my goodness, I can't remember.
I can't either. And so I think it was either Bob Quant or him.
Right.
And we went and did that Ted Nugent stuff. I remember that, but it could have been. I remember ML had put us out on some not Goo Goo Dolls, Puddle of Mud stuff. And
yeah.
I know we had done some Puddle of Mud stuff, so I don't know if that was first, but that really wasn't a tour. It was more it was like a selection of one-offs. It was either that or Ted Nugent.
Let me take us down a rabbit hole just a little bit here, because I want to point out to you, early on in my career, there was a couple of mentors in my life that kind of took me under their wing and were instrumental in getting me a lot of gigs. And I'm sure that it was kind of the same way for you, but I'm interested to hear from your side how you ended up there. But ML Pro Size was, God rest his soul, was probably the most instrumental in my live sound career, along with Toby Francis. It's funny. The way that I got to Ted Nugent was working for Kiss. Ted Nugent was opening for Kiss, and Greg Price was mixing Ted Nugent. And at one point, Greg had to leave or something, and I started mixing Ted Nugent and Kiss. And so got to know Bob Quant and all that kind of stuff. So then when Ted started doing his own touring, I went from arenas to tiny clubs.
Funny how that happens. And it happens quick.
Yeah, it happens really quick, doesn't it?
Yeah. It can happen in just a split second, actually. Either on your behalf or the band's behalf. You know, I did a Kiss tour in 1991, and not to drop any names, I guess, but that's what we're doing here. But that song Nirvana had, "Smells Like Teen Spirit," came out. We went from selling 15,000 arenas sold out to discounting tickets to $10 to get 300 people in an arena. So that killed the heavy metal industry all on its own.
Oh man. Yeah. I always tell a story about Nirvana with the whole Warrant thing, you know, how I worked for Warrant, and like, you know, Janie, all of the Columbia Records lobby was all Warrant. Like, I forget what year it was, but it was like, you know, Warrant banners.
Okay. Tell me this, was the white leather suits in there?
Yes, the white leather suits were there.
Okay.
No, but I mean, like banners, records. It was all, the whole lobby was Warrant, and he went there one time and walked in the lobby, and everything had changed to Nirvana. And he literally like walked in and went, "Oh, it's over, man. This is it. This is the sign."
Yeah. That was the song that killed the hard rock industry, you know. So
yeah. Well, so what I wanted to kind of go down that rabbit hole is that there was a time in this business, and I think it still kind of exists. And let's get to that in a minute. But there was a time in this business where mentors and older engineers kind of took people under their wing and said, you know, hey, you know, when I leave a gig or whatever, I'm going to, you know, try to put you in, or I'm going to try to help you. I believe in you, you know.
I also think the origin of that was kind of, you know, I had known ML, obviously he worked for Shoko, and I'd done tours with ML. He was a staff engineer, and he would get hired by, you know, his band, ZZ Top and all that stuff, because he worked at Shoko. And I think when he started seeing the evolution to the independent engineer in the business, I think to keep clients at Shoko, I think he started procuring this level of engineers to keep it all in, quote unquote, in the family. And I think that's where that kind of came from until he stopped mixing. And that's really what he was doing.
100%. I mean, I would say, you know, of course someone will fight me on this, but I would say that ML was probably the one that started that whole kind of independent engineer thing, and having a stable of engineers, that model of having a group of guys that he could pull from. And I think his idea was that we were interchangeable. You know, like if some guy had a gig and had to leave that gig, he had 3 other guys that he could put in there, and it would be, you know, and it would be the same or similar.
Gig.
Yes.
But I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying. So
you're right. If he didn't, so quote unquote, start that, he was definitely 1 or 2 that were doing it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that even if he wasn't the guy that started it, he was the guy that did it the best for a long period of time. But you know what's funny about all that is if ML were alive today, he would claim that he got me my first gig, which I think is so funny. That's not at all what happened. What happened was, you know, Robert Long, you know, he does production managing for Motley Crue and all kinds of bands now, Kiss. He was friends with Toby Francis before I knew Toby Francis. And Robert was out on Kiss as the guitar tech for Paul Stanley. And when Toby started saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to leave Kiss," you know, Robert went to bat for me and said, you know, "Hey, Toby, I got this guy." And Toby, like, he didn't know me at all. Only on Robert's recommendation did he say, "Okay, I'm going to put you in here," and told ML that he was going to hire this new guy. And Emma was like, who's this guy? I don't know who this guy is. You know, like I heard this
Toby
years
Pooch
later.
owes you money.
Exactly. Seriously. No, I mean, that's really the deal is that, you know, Toby Francis was the first guy in my career to get me a super big gig. I already had a resume, you know, I worked for a lot of hair bands. But he was kind of really the guy that, you know, that set my career on the thing. Hey, let's look. I see a question and answer thing just because I want this to be interactive. So we should look at that and see what's going on. So one of the questions is there a unique difference between working with younger bands versus the classic rock bands, like the Expectations, SPL, Attitude, Two Engineers? What do you think?
Definitely. I would say for unique difference between working with younger bands versus classic rock. Of course, because the generational differences, the attitudes are way different, and you have to definitely feel that out. Know where, like I said, I was talking about being older than Linkin Park guys. You got to know that and realize it and see where they're coming from.
I think for me, it depends on the client, but I will say in general, I think that's absolutely a true statement. You know, Justin Bieber doesn't give a fuck about me. He really doesn't. You know, his world as a billionaire, he lives in this weird billionaire world and he's, you know, doing his stuff, but he doesn't care much about what's happening with his audio engineer. A older classic rock band that came up in that era where engineers were kind of part of the family. You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but with Iron Maiden, I feel like I'm part of a family there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, by the way, what you said. I just couldn't get it out. Definitely. I mean, I think maybe some of the younger bands may let management choose those people for them, and I think more classic rock bands either know the people or they have a reputation and they want certain people. They're more in tune with their sound engineers for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's true, not just sound engineers, but like the entire crew.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, it's funny, we were talking about this the other day. There are very few millionaires that have called us to see how we're doing in this COVID time.
Very few?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. The band members of Iron Maiden didn't call us, but the managers of Iron Maiden called us and checked in with us, right? To be fair.
Very thankful.
Yeah.
First class organization.
And one of the first questions out of their mouths was, how are you guys doing? Do you guys need money? We know this is a hard situation right now. What's going on? Let's work something out. We want you to be part of our family, you know? So I think that's the difference, you know, a pop star who I mentioned earlier, his manager probably wouldn't be calling me right now and asking me if I was
what do you mean?
Okay.
He wouldn't be, has he? He can answer the question.
Well, I know, right? I mean, that's geez. I think that is a twofold problem, though. One of the problems there is that most bands and millionaire type people just don't have it on their radar that we are people that live kind of check to check. You know what I mean? So in their world where they're just kind of like, yeah, this COVID thing sucks and we're not making any money right now, but we're fine and everything's paid for and all that kind of stuff is what their world is. And so they just assume that we're like that, like everything's cool, you know, we're just hanging out, you know, whatever. So I kind of don't blame them for calling us and checking in with us. But on the other hand, yeah, how many of them have called us? That's kind of weird. Anyway, enough about COVID. I don't want to talk about COVID. Fuck that shit.
You know,
anyway.
that was actually one of my stipulations we started about this. I didn't really want to talk about that at all. I was a little upset with, I got off social media for about 4 weeks because I saw people bragging about checks they were getting and posting them on there. And I got a little upset with that. But then as it's turned into a long-term thing now, I think it's something we have to discuss because it's what's out there right now. And we will get into it, especially when we have guests on how it's affecting sound companies, manufacturers, other engineers.
Oh yeah, for sure. We'll definitely go down that road, but I don't want this to be I went to some webinar just a little while ago, some production thing, and there was a lot of people there, and it was like the whole thing was like dudes talking about how we're all going to die and we're never going to work again. It's like, no, that's not true. We're all going to be okay. We really are.
We are, and use this for much needed rest that we probably all needed. There's no doubt about that. I did.
Yeah, well, you weren't working for Shoko anymore. Those poor Claire
that's true.
guys.
That's true.
Those poor Claire guys, they were like, oh, getting a rest. Thanks.
I get a few days off. Yeah.
This is a hilarious thing. One of the question and answer things from somebody says, why are so many sound guys used to play bass? And what's so funny is that you're a bass player and I'm a bass player. So that is true.
You are definitely a bass player. I was more of a bass stylist. Not actually a player. I was more of a stylist.
Can we tell them a little bit about your costume?
Sure. I had a great costume.
So not only
I'm proud of it. You got to remember, this was like 83, 84.
You got to remember that Tater not only played a 2-string bass, but he had a cape. You had a cape, didn't you?
I had a cape.
Who made the cape?
Red cape.
A red cape. Did you stitch that up, or did you have your mom do it, or how that happened?
No, somebody made those for us. We had a few custom pieces, believe it or not, and that was one of them, the cape. But I love that cape. I wonder where my buddy Doug might still have a few of those pieces. He may still have the cape. And I may have not been the exclusive one to wear that cape. It may have went around the 4 band members.
Oh no, it was a shared cape. That's even worse. Oh my God.
We were under budget restraints.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, the guy has a point, right? Like Brad Divins, he's a bass player.
Yeah, he's another real bass player. Yeah.
Yeah. You were a real bass player. Brad Maddox played keyboards, right? Like he went to Berklee College of Music too. So musicians
I think he played in a famous band even.
He
so
did.
Yeah.
What band was that?
Yeah.
What
I gotta say, I'll give a shout out. Going back to this, I keep going back there, but the Shoko days, one of the greatest mixers I had worked with there was a guy named Mike Ponzak. And they called him Funk. He mixed McCartney. He mixed The Who. He mixed everybody. He was still is a great guy. And he was a keyboard player. And the thing I liked about him most, and I think about that to this day, is Funk never looked like he was touching a knob. And it would just come out like magic. He was always focused on the band. He wasn't really down in his console and doing stuff. I think he was treating it like the piano. He was playing this thing. And I always took a little bit of inspiration from him. He was such a great mixer and a great guy. He's still down there in Dallas. And he was definitely one of the people I looked up to coming up and watching and seeing how the pros did it. I'd done a few Eric Clapton tours with him, and just a great guy. Shout out to you, Funk. I hope you're watching.
Shout out. He's definitely not watching.
Maddox played in Survivor.
Oh, so that's what it was. Survivor.
We'd play Eye of the Tiger.
I knew he had the Eye of the Tiger, that guy.
That guy, the Eye of the Tiger. There's a little trivia for you. If you see Brad Maddox out there mixing Florence and the Machine, go sing Eye of the Tiger too.
Thanks,
shout out to Brad. Amazing mixer. Yeah, man. So good stuff. But I think, I've always thought that I don't think that you have to be a musician to be an engineer, but I think to have a discussion with musicians, it definitely helps, right? Do you feel that's true? Like, even though you say you're not a bass player, but you have some knowledge of music, has that helped you in your career?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I'll always say, I think I can dial in the bass player's mix probably the best, right off the bat.
That's so rad.
Probably because of that,
All right. Right.
And things that I didn't have experience with. Linkin Park, I think, was probably the first time I'd ever done a DJ, like in a band situation.
Right.
So I'm sure there was some learning curve then, and the things like that that I had no experience with. But it pops up. That's for sure.
Well, and I think like in the language, right? So when you're speaking to a musician and he goes, yeah, that part in the bridge, I want that to be louder. you know what the bridge is, right? Like you're like, okay, I know.
I asked the Pro Tools guy.
Now you do, but when you were working for
yeah. I mean, when you're doing rock bands, you kind of know those pieces and parts. It's just when they have the pre-bridge and the this and that. Now they have all these new things they call out, you know. But yeah, on the rock music and heavy metal, I kind of get where those parts are. Yeah,
that's so funny. You know what's funny, dude, is I like Jay-Z was one of those guys that called songs on the fly, right? And then he would get on his talkback and tell his playback engineer to do different stuff. And so I had to have a screen in front of me that was a copy of the playback engineer. So that I could see like where we were going and what was happening. Cause it was literally like chasing. I mean, I imagine it's a lot like working for Bruce Springsteen, right? That guy just calls out songs.
Yeah. With no Pro Tools though. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, as the front of house guy, you know, because it could take you
a bit to hit the right scene for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coop's an amazing engineer. If you ever go see Bruce Springsteen, he's great. He actually came out and was the system engineer on a Linkin Park run. Do you remember that?
Sure was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure was.
I was
glad to have him.
Oh man, it blew me away. I was like, here's this guy that mixes Bruce Springsteen and he's my system engineer. It was like, it was trippy. I was like, whoa. Yeah, anyway, so, you know, I think it's cool to have a little bit of music knowledge in what's going on. Let's look at a couple more questions here. Did you want to say anything more about your journey at all? Or
I mean, that's pretty much it. After I left Shoko, I just been, independent engineer making a living at mixing legacy and rock bands. So,
right.
But we're going to get into later how we evolved from that a bit and became business owners and maybe help the young guys increase their incomes maybe and do some other stuff. And we'll talk about that in the webinars up and coming, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we really thought that this could be a once a week thing that you guys could tune in and like kind of wherever it goes, and we talk about stuff, but these are all things that we're kind of have in an outline on the side of like, okay, maybe we'll start talking about this today. Could be about, how do you rent your gear to the client, because both of us do that. And,
I'd like to go down the pitfalls of that and the joys of it.
There's pitfalls. What pitfalls?
I can show you my insurance bills for the guy selling me insurance for gear I'm not going to rent for a year if that's a joyous part, not a pitfall.
Yeah, and the guy that put your post office box as the place where you were insured. So so basically you paid for insurance for like 3 years, even though you weren't really
on a
insured.
UPS post box.
Yeah, perfect. Anyway, we'll get down that road. But I think, this being our first one, I think we should continue down the road just a little bit more about our relationship and how we met and how we continued.
We kind of went off a bit. We were talking about the first bands we worked for, and you asked the question of the impression of each other, and we kind of didn't touch on that after the question.
Go ahead. You thought I was a dick, didn't you?
I didn't. Even before we started working together, I kind of I had worked for Alice Cooper for a long time, and in the time I was there, he only had maybe 2 front of house engineers. So I was used to having a longer term relationship with front of house guys for working. I worked for Alice a long time. Same with Judas Priest, 1 front of house guy the whole time I was there. So I'm used to a long relationship with the front of house guy over the bands.
An 18-year relationship?
Not that long. Not that long. So, okay. And not as many bands either. These are just one bands. We've done many bands. Right. So, I just took it apart. I knew you were good. There was no doubt about it. But still, good or not, the way you mix and your style has to work with me, because I always feel for my consistency, the front of house has to be consistent. If the front of house isn't inconsistent, it is inconsistent all the time. The monitors will not be consistent. I don't care what you say. You can blow that theory out however you want. There's people much smarter than me. I can just tell you from experience, standing behind PA systems, that if that front of house is not consistent, the monitors will not be consistent, especially for a hard rock or rock act. So we did those Ted Nugent shows, and I think I don't know if we were carrying a PA, maybe just consoles or something. I can't remember.
I don't even think we were carrying consoles. It's been so long. I don't remember. I think it was his typical, going out for a couple of months doing club stuff.
It was clubby.
Theaters. Yeah.
Clubby and theaters. Yeah. So I just remember at the end of that is probably really the consistency of it all, and where and that benefiting me and really helped me concentrate on Ted, because it was just Ted. Was a 3-piece band at that time? I can't remember. It's changed so much. I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 piece. But no,
it was 3-piece. It was Marco and Tommy. Yeah. No, not Clufetos. No? It was
Mcbrain.
No, come on, White Snake guy.
Tommy Aldrich.
Yeah, Tommy Aldrich.
Tommy Aldrich. Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So yeah. I wanted to give a shout out to Tommy Clufetos because he's another Detroit guy. So
fellow
trying
Detroit.
To get him the job there, trying to get him in the memory.
So and that poor guy not only is not working in COVID, but now his artist is probably not going to work again ever.
That is true. Very true.
Yeah, Tommy. If you know who Tommy Clufetos is, he's a drummer for Ozzy amongst tons of other bands. But now Ozzy looks like he's not going to tour anymore. So
yeah,
scary.
Yeah, but he's a great drummer. I'm sure he'll land on his feet. He's awesome.
I'm sure he will too.
Yeah. So I think it was just basically that's what I look for is the consistency, behind the PA. And obviously we were doing it then with not the same PA, which even makes it even harder, right? We're using a different system every day. And so I think I got to tell you, I remember one story. I remember I must have been carrying something because I had some extra ML18s.
Right.
And I wasn't using them. And I remember you took them from me and used them at the front of house PA in some club. And I thought, oh, maybe I do like this guy. If he needs a couple extra ML18s for his PA, he's struggling out there. He's going to get this together. Yeah. And it turned out to be great as always. So I think the impression was good. I don't judge people too hard. God, I say that. It's probably totally wrong. I think I'm a hater before I'm a lover. So, yeah, I probably did, to be honest. But no, it was fine probably within minutes. And God, and then I think to go on to the Puddle of Mud stories, those were barely shows. If we even played a whole set list, we probably never did more than 3 songs, maybe. So
was that the next band we worked with together?
It was either the first or the next. I can't remember. But, those shows didn't last long. So
what a mess that guy was.
Yeah, it was a mess. Yeah. So it was hard to probably tell on that one, right?
Well, you know what though? What's funny about that is that me thinking about back to you, literally like I have vivid memories of like, wow, this guy survived Ted Nugent. And wow, this guy survived Puddle of Mud. Maybe there's something to this, like I totally, because I didn't know you, I was expecting to, be a round robin of monitor engineers,
Oh, right. So,
yeah. Immediately I saw that you were really good at what you did. And I think that we struck up a friendship pretty quickly.
Yeah. Plus we both like to eat.
Yes. I think that was it, right? We were like, that's why we became
friends. I think we're all lying here. I think it was the food actually, but okay. Yeah, it was audio.
Yeah, it was audio. No, it was definitely the food. But I along with you, I totally believe that a monitor engineer's job is to supplement what's happening from the blowback of the PA, right?
Yeah.
So the best monitor stages that I have walked on is when front of house is muted, the stage sounds weird and thin and, it doesn't sound like a record, you know what I mean? Wedge wise, like it sounds very like kind of broken apart and like weird pieces and all this kind of shit. And the reason is as soon as you add the PA into that, the combination of the two things is what the guys on stage are feeling. And I think that you had a real skill, or you have a real skill of that.
Well, like I say, you see a lot of people, they're doing a sound check. No, turn the front of house off, turn the front of house off. And sometimes you need to do that. It's useful, but I'm thinking
that never happens.
Well, it's happened a few times, but not
not on purpose.
So it's happened a few times, not on purpose. So they usually don't play with the PA off. I mean, I want to say hopefully 100% of the time, but let's at least go with 99% of the time the PA is on, and you got to make it sound good with that noise around. You know what I mean? You have to fill in those gaps. I'm in a certain vein of music. I only basically do hard rock bands and heavy metal bands, so I know what those guys want it to sound like, and I think I have a pretty good reputation of making it sound like that. With the front of house on.
Yeah, absolutely. It was what I noticed right away, and it's what I noticed for future bands down the road. Even, I always tell people that that the thing that you were really good at was the combination of us, right?
Yeah.
And
the sound was moving together instead of this. I always felt like it was moving in one direction off the stage all the way out.
Yeah. That's
I never pertain, and I'll never say I have golden ears and this and that, and
I won't either.
And, bring down 1K at 0.6 of a dB, and I was never that kind of guy. I think, like what you said, I didn't realize before. I think more of my skill was it was in figuring that out, what the stage should sound like with the PA on, and navigating through those things, and paying attention to the artist and what they say. It's crucial to listen. That's another thing. You got guys, I've seen monitor engineers go up there and tell them what they want to hear, and you get frustrated and okay, whatever he says, but in the end it's not right, so
no, that doesn't work.
You gotta listen. The biggest tip I always say is keep your head up, and you gotta listen to them and do what they want. It's not if it sounds great in your ears or sounds bad, it doesn't matter. It's what they want. You're not given the creative license to be their ears and their headspace. So
yeah, I think it's more of being, a mental health care worker than it is being an audio engineer. In that, I can't tell you. I will tell you that some of the best singers I know in the world, and one of them being Chester Bennington, was someone that didn't know how good they were. And he didn't know how good he was. Yeah. And he would come to me and to you, and like all he wanted was for you to pay attention to him, because you were like his lifeline while he's
basically his roadie. He doesn't have a guitar. He did on a couple songs, but you're kind of his guy as the monitor guy. You're kind of his guy. He doesn't have anybody else like that. So you do kind of have to, really be focused on a person like that and make him feel comfortable. There's no doubt about it.
And what I notice about that too is that they are maybe so uncomfortable or so unsure of what's going on in the moment with you being there for them. You're the only guy that they're really connecting. They're in front of 14,000 people, but you as a monitor engineer, they're looking over all the time going, am I okay? Like literally that's what they're asking is, am I okay? And that's a skill definitely that I think that you have as well.
Yeah. I mean, I sure wish he was still here to ask him.
Yeah, for sure.
But we can't. And I hope I had that relationship with him. I think I did. I mean, I was there quite a long time.
Absolutely did, Tater.
Okay.
There's no question about it. You were the last person he connected with before he took that stage, and the first person he connected with after the show. You were it. You were the lifeline every day. No question about it.
I'm glad I made him feel comfortable. I guess I did my job. I mean, so
yeah.
Don't forget. I mean, God, I did Stone Temple Pilots with him. I did Dead by Sunrise. Yeah. We did a lot of stuff together. So,
God, you keep bringing up bands that I like. When I was trying to figure out the bands, I had a list of 10 bands, and you're like, oh yeah, and I forgot about Dead by Sunrise. I forgot about
STP. Yeah. So you start talking about it, then you realize, but get those tours done, and we put them out of our mind. So
I know.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
On to the next one.
It's crazy. I look back on my career along with you and realize how blessed I was in that journey. You know what I mean? It's like dude, there was a time period there we look Linkin Park to Stone Temple Pilots to what else did we do?
The Dead by Sunrise. Talk
Dead
about
by
dropping
Sunrise.
it back into clubs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's always been our career, both yours and mine, is like, we'll catch a band in a weird moment, like Prophets of Rage, Rage Against the Machine, basically.
Yeah.
Didn't have maybe quite the following that Rage Against the Machine did, but Prophets of Rage had a pretty big following. We would do, theaters, but then do you remember that promo tour that we did? That was just like, what's that club in Jersey? Stone Pony.
Stone Pony.
Oh,
yeah. Stone Pony, TLA.
Fucking God, what are we doing? Like, I literally was there that day just going, what am I doing here? But
yeah, very, very blessed though to be able to even, step over these names we're dropping, obviously.
I know, right.
Yeah. Great.
And that's what this isn't about that. We're not trying to drop names.
Yeah.
We're trying to give you examples of the storied career that we've been through and been lucky to be in.
Extremely lucky.
Yeah.
Extremely lucky. A lot of people helping us along that path.
For sure. Who are some of your mentors? Like who would you say were kind of where you learned your skills from?
Great question. I love that question because I'd like to give a shout out to a couple people. In Detroit here, a guy named Jerry Ferdicki is no longer with us. He showed me stuff right and wrong. I learned a lot of wrong stuff from him to what he was doing and a lot of right stuff. And then Matt Braun, who's still with us, thank God. What a fantastic sound engineer. He can make anything sound just awesome. So, junkie PAs, Matt could really do it and showed me how to do that at a club level. I could never duplicate what Matt does, but he showed me that. And that was kind of through then. But I had to babysit a lot of great monitor engineers in my showcode days, Chris Wade Evans, Dave Ranke, John Roden, a bunch of really solid monitor engineers.
And guys, if you are young, take those names, go search them. Go find out about those dudes. Those are some huge monitor engineers you just dropped.
Yeah. I mean, even like Ron Reeves. I mean, Ron was a showcode guy, and now, he mixes the Grammys and all those huge.
Didn't he do some porn for a while? No, sorry, that was Ron Jeremy.
Wrong guy. But Ron, Ron was a great engineer. I mean, I just worked with tons of them. So I try to take some from all of them, and good or bad. I saw a lot of guys doing a lot of bad stuff, and I don't mean mixing wise either. I mean personal stuff, interactions with the crew, interactions with management, all that kind of stuff, and interactions with me, how I would treat my guy coming up, things that were said to me that I thought, damn, if I'm in that position, I would never say that to my guy,
Yeah, and we should talk about that, man. I just, there's so many things that we can talk about, and that's kind of why we decided to make this a live thing and a weekly thing, is so that we can, get into some of this stuff, But remember that, though. Write that down. I want to talk about more about what was said to you that that you'll never say to your guy, because I mean,
you got to remember, it was a more of a drug fueled business back then, and it was way more of a it was a lot.
Drug, sex, and rock and roll, man.
Yeah, it was a lot harder. The mentality was a lot, not dealing with people very well back then the way it is now. So in life, though,
I mean,
it was just the way it was in life then and the way it is life now, So.
Well, I think that this has become way more business. Before was cocaine cowboy circus. You didn't really have to have a skill to be here. You could you could be a lost boy and just show up and be like, okay, we'll make you a monitor engineer.
Yep.
But nowadays it's, you really have to, guys are going to school and it's really a skill, to have those things.
Yeah.
Let's try to grab a couple more questions, but
we're getting close.
Hey guys, I know that, we asked you to write questions, and we are definitely going to try to get to some of these. When we sign off of here, I'm going to try to maybe do a screen grab of some of these, and we'll get to them. And we really appreciate that you asked us questions. It's just so hard. We got so much to say and talk about. It's hard to to get to them all in the same one. So
I
hopefully
guess maybe I've got time. Maybe we'll stay on, not on this, but on me and you together, and we'll try to answer some of those or something if there's questions. I don't even know. Can't tell if there is. So.
I can't tell.
I see a few.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a bunch of questions, and we'll try to get those down so that next week maybe we can try to get some of them.
Yeah.
But let's just grab a little bit of this. Someone asked this an interesting question, is like, do you have any resources that I can use during this quarantine because I'm bored in my house? Well, let me just tell you, if you are bored, as we all are, I am so busy every single day going and watching people's resources online right now. Like, if you don't come out of this quarantine like being smarter, then you're doing it wrong. You know what I mean? I'm just saying there are so many resources out there right now. Everybody is doing, podcasts and whatever. Search for all of the kind of ones, Robert Schofield is doing The Lab. I'm doing the Pooch and Tater thing on my YouTube channel. We're really enjoying doing that. And then almost every manufacturer is like doing something. Is there one that you're watching or looking at these days?
I'm pretty, I watched all the Digico stuff, no matter what level of anything. I love to see how other people do stuff because I always feel I'm doing it wrong. So I like to just kind of reiterate that. But
what was that monitor engineer, Dan, somebody that he just posted a bunch of stuff on Digico? Was it Dan? The English guy.
No, Matt Napier. Matt.
Oh, yeah. Why did I say Dan?
Great.
Yeah, Matt Napier. Holy shit, man. Super clear
awesome
and concise.
Stuff. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really, really good. If you're a monitor engineer, like go to Digico, go to their Facebook page, and there's a bunch of Matt Napier talking about stuff.
Yeah.
Check
really
his
good.
shit out. It's really good.
I would also say, he's 17. I don't know if he knows any local sound companies or anything, but if he's in a quarantine area, they're not using their gear. See if you could just go there and
that's a great thing.
It and try to ask them if you can go in a corner away from everybody, plug it in, and have a few hours on it.
That's a great idea. So as we get, I know a lot of places are still locked down, but as we get to that place where we can actually maybe leave our house as long as we're socially distant, I would totally hit up a local sound company and be like, hey, would you mind if I came and played with some of your stuff that's not working? If you live
in Detroit, he can come here. I've got 2 consoles here. He can use that are not being rented. So
you're well, not only that, my console's there too. You guys, there's 3 consoles, 2 SD7s and an SD5 at Tater Shop if you guys want to go work on some stuff.
And you know what else? We'll put up an audio references page on the symposium website. You guys can populate it for everyone.
Very, very cool. Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, man, there is just tons of resources, and we'll try to post some of that stuff, and we'll also try to get to some of these questions later on.
I see
it looks like also
questions
in the chat. Cape questions.
I have no idea where the Cape is, and I think there's a picture somewhere.
Really? Oh, you have to find it. You have to. I have in the next couple of weeks, I have a bunch of pictures from when we first started working together 18 years ago.
I saw one. And boy, is it funny.
We're kids. Yeah. So we'll share some of that. Coming up. So next week, everybody, we're coming to the end here. This is an hour-long thing, and we really, really appreciate you guys showing up. We hope you got something out of this. We really just kind of wanted to have this first one be an introduction to who we are and what we do, and so we hope that you enjoyed it. At least it was entertaining, maybe. You may not have learned anything, but we hope it was entertaining at least in this day and age. But coming up next week is a guy named Tim Shaner. He is our guest, and he is a Claire systems engineer that both Tater and I have worked with, not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
Yeah. Who did you work with him?
Tim Shaner came out with us on Linkin Park when Brad was mixing at the very end.
Right. Yeah.
We'd like to get into the relationship, especially with the front of house engineer duties changing so much, the monitor relationship. We're trying to go with the monitor relationship with the front of house guy, but a lot of times that can't happen at 100%. So you're really dealing with the systems engineer a lot nowadays. So we kind of want to dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be fun. I think that's kind of the mode that we're going to go in for future things. Just so you know, it'll be Tater and I, and then a special guest and interjection between the three of us talking about stuff. And again, there's no format to this. We're just kind of talking about audio and hanging out and talking about stories. And, you know, we hope you enjoy it. You know, we don't want it to be like us reliving our past. That's not what we're here for.
Yeah, not a lot of road stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a whole lot of road stories, but some.
Hey, and I think, Pooch, if we're not careful, we might see an artist or two pop up too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have been contacting, we've kind of been pulling together all of our friends and saying, hey, how are you? And yeah, it looks like maybe we'll have some artists. So anyway, we're, you know, of course we will hit you up on social media and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So you'll know who's coming. But Tim Shaner next week, he's amazing. He was my system engineer for Travis Scott, which is a whole other story. Maybe I'm sure we'll have some stories there. But anyway, thanks a lot for coming, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you. Yeah. Stay safe, stay inside. We hope that you aren't touched by this thing too much, and we'll see you again next week. Oh, also, I wanted to tell you before you go, we are talking about moving this to Tuesdays at 1 p.m. 1 p.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. And because the reason is that Mondays are so cluttered, like there's so many other things happening on Monday. So we thought that Tuesdays would be maybe a better day. So starting next week, we're going to be Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.